Just give me a 3, 2, 1. Is that camera 2 or is that camera? Should last before now. Welcome back to Airplay. My name is Michael Koretsky. I'm a national board member with the Society of Professional Journalists. And for those of you in the room, I've been notified there's been a bomb threat. Surprise, surprise.
Thanks, Arthur.
Because this is a secure facility, because we took security precautions, we're going to continue. But if anyone in this room wants to leave, you can do so. No hassle and no judgments. Anyone want to leave? That would suck. All right, with that out of the way, this morning we talked about the ethics of the gaming press. This afternoon we're going to talk about how mainstream media should cover online controversies like GamerGate. The panelists have changed a little bit. Representing GamerGate as chosen by GamerGate, Milo Yiannopoulos, Christina Hoff Sommers, and Cathy Young. And just as we did in the morning, we're going to be very journalistic and give them 30 seconds to tell us their life story. Go ahead, Milo.
My name is Milo Yiannopoulos. I'm a journalist, author, satirist, broadcaster. I've been covering GamerGate for the last year, and it's been the most rewarding and extraordinary story of my career.
Christina Hoff Sommers, former philosophy professor and resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, author of various books, Who Stole Feminism, War Against Boys, One Nation Under Therapy. And I'm delighted to be here talking about gamers.
I'm Cathy Young. I'm a journalist who writes for a lot of outlets. I'm affiliated with Reason Magazine, which is a libertarian publication. I also write for a bunch of other places. I write about gender issues quite a bit. I've written a book called Ceasefire, Why Women and Men Should Join Forces to Achieve True Equality. And I have written about GamerGate and its intersections with gender issues. And I find it to be a fascinating topic, and I look forward to this panel.
All right, representing not GamerGate, 2 journalists and an independent game developer. We have Lynn LaForme, Lynn Walsh, Derek Smart. Ren, why don't you kick us off?
I'm Ren LaForme. I work for the Poynter Institute, which is a nonprofit training school for journalists right here in Florida. I train journalists on a variety of topics, including ethics. I was named after Kevin Bacon's character in the movie Footloose, not Ren and Stimpy, and I really enjoy Adam Baldwin's work in Firefly.
I'm Lynn Walsh. I sit on the national board for the Society of Professional Journalists. I also am involved with their ethics committee and did help rewrite and rework the SPJ Code of Ethics, which is one of the most widely used codes for journalists as a basis when they're doing their reporting. I also lead an investigative unit in San Diego.
I'm Derek Smart. I'm a gamer and game developer. Been doing games and gaming for over 30 years. I love this industry, love everything about it, and I'm here to make sure that gamers and game developers have a voice in this nice little debate.
All right, if you guys thought that the morning panel, as some GamerGaters critiqued me, saying it was too freeform, not Oxford enough and organized and planned, they're really going to hate this because we got no script and no plan. What we're going to do is let our new GamerGate panelists talk for about a minute about, I don't know, whatever the hell they want to talk about. They said they want to talk. I'm going to let them talk. Then they're going to go back and start making a couple of points about GamerGate and online movements, and these guys are going to riff on it, and we're just going to talk. Especially for the studio audience here, if you guys have questions or comments, we want to hear them, and we want to try to get in this discussion more comments and questions from online. So, who wants to start?
Milo.
Of course.
When the Special Victims Unit Law & Order episode came out, it did more damage to the reputation of the video games industry than anything gamers have ever done. And responsible more than anybody else for that episode were game journalists. They had not only, over the course of more than a decade, created an environment in which it was acceptable to ridicule and deride and to criticize their own readers, but they had also, once that scandal blew up into the GamerGate controversy, deliberately provoked their readers over and over and over again and painted their own industry, absurdly and unfairly, as one that was uniquely hostile to women and minorities. Now, I've seen this happen before in another industry that didn't deserve it either. And that's the startup industry in San Francisco. Interestingly, video gaming and startups are probably the two industries where women and minorities are welcomed the most. They're the industries that are disproportionately progressive in terms of politics, right the way up and down the corporate food chain. Yet they're the industries that have this weird sort of pearl-clutching, hand-wringing middle-class white guilt about whether or not there are enough women, whether or not there are enough minorities. And this has metastasized into an environment in which it's okay to tweet things like, kill all white men. And in GamerGate, in the gaming industry, it became okay to say that being a straight white male was the lowest difficulty setting. Nobody appreciated the irony of criticizing and ridiculing people for their skin color or for their sex. But game journalists got it into their head that the new sort of progressive, feminist-driven politics was something that they should aspire to, and it led them to all kinds of horrible journalistic failings. Now, I've got 6, which I'm not going to give you all in one go because it'll be impossible to respond to. 6 things that I think journalists really screwed up. And I think those 6 things illustrate really well how to report on these sorts of movements and how to not report on these sorts of movements.
Do you want to go over those now, or you want to get those guys having their statements?
Well, I think I'm going to hand over to the others, and then maybe at some point in the next hour, I'd just like to sort of explain to you guys what I think the 6 big ethical failures, transgressions, betrayals, whatever you want to call it, to GamerGate have been from the games press, and what we can do in future to encourage people to report more responsibly, more truthfully, and to avoid the narrative over fact style of activist reporting, which has caused a lot of people a lot of pain, because ultimately this isn't just another front in the culture wars. Gamergate is in a way a sort of geek civil war. There are lots of people who look very similar to one another, warring over things they really care about, warring over stuff they love, warring over stuff that gave them an escape from life when they didn't have one, gave them an avenue into new imaginative worlds and escapist sort of universes when real life wasn't that great. Games journalists have taken that away from them because they've toxified and politicized that gaming space. I think that's a huge and frankly unforgivable betrayal of what gaming journalism was supposed to be there to do, which is to support consumers and to support gamers. I think we'll hand over, but my 6 points later on I think will explain where we should go from here and how to get it right in future.
Don't forget this conversation's about mainstream media covering.
Sure, but I mean, the mainstream media uncritically repeats all of the outright, mendacious falsehoods. So often we've seen it again and again and again in the GamerGate controversy. And with some justification, it's perfectly reasonable for them to assume that game journalists are doing their job properly if they don't know any better. They're looking at the work of fellow professionals and seeing, this person has been attacked, this person, and it appears on the page of the New York Times. We heard the New York Times praised this morning. The New York Times has done one of the worst jobs of anyone. I'm amazed that nobody said so. The New York Times uncritically reported things that with very shaky evidence, and then gave a platform to one of the people in question. So I'm going to hand over, but I think when I explain to you, I really am. When I explain to you the 6 things I think are the really serious failings, I think that they'll serve as a useful guide for the mainstream media, so that you know what to look out for next time.
Wow, you did that without breathing.
Hello. A video game journalist from Vancouver recently took to Twitter to draw attention to a tweet that was sent by a gamer. The gamer tweeted, I'm quoting, this is not me now, I fucking swear. They get rid of huge boobs, I'm gone. Now, now just wait. And now for this journalist, those 11 words captured the essence of the GamerGate crusade. It was all there, the hyper-masculine dude bro attitude, the crude objectification of women. As he put it, this is GamerGate summarized in one impossibly perfect tweet. But as is often the case with media accounts of GamerGate, the facts didn't fit the narrative. First of all, the author wasn't talking about video games, but rather efforts to censor some subreddits on Reddit. More importantly, the author of the tweet was a young woman. Her name is Allison. She's a lesbian who apparently enjoys gazing at images of busty women. Now, it's the game journalist tweet, not Allison's, that for me is emblematic and an impossibly perfect illustration of a serious flaw in contemporary journalism. The narrative matters more than the truth. Now, Rolling Stone's apocryphal story about a gang rape at UVA by a fraternity, that's cited now as a classic example of narrative overreach. The press literature on GamerGate is strikingly similar. And I don't mean only the gamer press. I don't mean Gawker. I mean the treatment in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Vox, CBS News, leading to the Law and Order episode. According to dozens of media stories, GamerGate, it's a cabal, a nightmarish cabal of right-wing males who will stop at nothing to keep women out of gaming, and comparisons with hate groups, lynch mobs, even Donald Trump. In reality, GamerGate is just an amorphous group of video game enthusiasts. These are people who've come together to defend a hobby they dearly love. Now, some are motivated to join, write for this hashtag, post at this hashtag because they see corruption in game journalism. Others are concerned about the politicization, the imposition of political correctness on games. They identify for different reasons. Many are, I think what drew me into it as an expert on feminism, a critic, very much myself, an equity feminist, but a critical of hardline, radical grievance feminists. I saw that the gamers were struggling with a feminist critique. Many of them seem to me to be fair-minded, and the gamers that I know are equity feminists, but they are not grievance feminists, they're not hardliners, and they resented the idea that a special school of feminism was imposed on them. Now, the media focuses on what they call, that there have been all of these threats to women. Women have had to flee their homes when they criticize a game, and then they are targeted with hate mail and so forth. Now, this is deplorable, and it's true. The press has been correct in reporting this outpouring of ugliness on the internet. But it's, in the case of GamerGate, there is ugliness targeted. Both sides are targeted. And the media is very concerned with the damsel in distress narrative, which is fine, but there are damsels on both sides in the GamerGate. No one knows who sent these threats. It could be anyone. It's the internet. GamerGate's not an organization with a mission statement and a board of directors. It's a hashtag. It's simply, there's no way to police it. Gamers have tried, but there is no way to know who's doing this. But the press, including the Washington Post and the New York Times, could have automatically assume the guilt of those associated with GamerGate. And I'll just conclude by saying that I did come to the defense and made some videos on my video blog, the Factual Feminist, and I've come to know a lot of gamers, and I'm not sure I've ever met a community of a more diverse, more welcoming, funny, creative, artistic, through the course of this year, I lost my husband, and the gamers and others found out about it, and they sent flowers and a card with hundreds of messages and notes from people that I don't know, but who seemed just so kind and concerned. That's my acquaintance with the gamers. They call me based mom. I'm not exactly sure what, I think it means, I used to think it meant cool mom, I sort of like that, but I think it means grounded and authentic, no nonsense. Now, the critics of GamerGate find this epithet, they find it sinister and bizarre, and I think they're just projecting their own troubled mindset onto a lot of very nice, wonderful people. I see GamerGate as a citizen uprising, and like Occupy Wall Street or Black Lives Matter. Now, there are some unstable people on the fringes, but I think journalism at its best aims to tell the whole truth. And that means reporting not just on the fringes, but also and primarily on the authentic majority at the center. And it's time to do that for GamerGate. Thank you.
Well, I'm just going to follow up with more media bashing. I mean, in addition to covering gender issues, I'm very interested in writing about media coverage of gender issues, sort of media coverage of other issues that I find to be of interest. And I have to say, I really don't think I've seen any story that has been covered quite as badly as GamerGate in the sense of just completely one-sided presentation. Christina brought up the UVA gang rape story that most apparently didn't happen. This is almost like the UVA gang rape story without the correctives, without the reevaluation of that story that came later. And one thing that I want to say is that I think what happened with GamerGate is that it kind of, the harassment narrative, the narrative of GamerGate as this misogynist harassment mob, kind of tied into another, I think, very skewed narrative that had already been going on by then, which is this, a lot of stories about online harassment of women as something that was kind of specifically targeting women. And it's something that I actually wrote about before GamerGate. I looked at a lot of studies. I mean, obviously, we all know that online harassment happens, and there are a lot of problems with, it's a great thing that the internet has given everyone access to, journalists among other people and, just general access to other people. But of course, the problem is that some of the people who get that access are, the bad kind of people who, want to use it to make threats and to harass people. I don't think, I've looked at a lot of studies that it is something that is specific to women. The Pew Research Center, which does the most reputable studies of online life, basically, has done this several times, has done surveys of online harassment. And they have actually found that in some way, men are more likely than women, for instance, to get physical threats. Young women are more likely to get certain types of sexual harassment. That is very true. But if you look at harassment of journalists specifically, it is really not a gender-specific issue. And I think in that sense, the GamerGate narrative of supposedly misogynist harassment really became a part of this larger story. And I think it's very difficult to cover something like this when you do stories of people who say that they have been harassed and threatened. You really don't want to question them and say that, well, give us proof that you were really harassed and threatened, because then you're going to look really insensitive and horrible if it turns out that, yes, they were telling the truth all along, and you look like you were kind of compounding their misery by seeming to disbelieve them. But at the same time, I think we have to find a way to approach stories like that while still doing the basic duty of fact-checking, which is very important. And I think it's not even necessarily that you're going to say, oh, this person is lying. This person, who may very well be getting harassed, is also probably going to have a somewhat subjective interpretation of what's going on. Like, there have been claims made by people in the
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
I appreciate everything you guys are saying, but it has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Well, we're getting to that.
Okay.
Well, I want to start there.
Okay.
So first of all,
Look, what we needed to do is set up what we felt.
okay, well, what you set up, though, we aren't here to discuss feminism, because that's not what this panel is about. That's a great panel discussion. I would love to be a part of that.
What you can't do is say, here are 10 rules to follow, and you'll never make the mistake that journalists made about GamerGate again. What we're trying to show you is that this bad reporting comes from a particular historical, political, and social milieu. It arises out
Okay,
of
hold
a
on. Before
culture.
let me, you know what? Fair enough. Ren and Lynn, what does this tell you?
You mean what they just said?
Yeah, what did you get out of it?
The only thing that I just wrote down was what Cathy said at the end about if someone approaches me and says that they've been harassed and it's by someone and they want me to tell the story, I actually do ask them for proof. I ask them why they know this, and you do it in a way that is, very respectful. You try not to be intrusive, but unfortunately, that's part of my job. I have to make sure that I'm verifying facts. I have to see what they have. I have to try to put their timeline. I might talk to other people, maybe even if maybe I'm keeping their identity secret, I want to try to get a hold of people who might know them without jeopardizing that. But I am really still asking for proof and that kind of thing. So that was the only thing I just heard that I was like, wait a second, no, actually, as a good journalist does have to verify those things, even as uncomfortable as those conversations are to have.
I think one of the things this is getting to right off the bat is where does GamerGate end on ethics and get into quote-unquote social justice warriors? Because you guys spent your opening comments.
Well, these things are not separable.
Well, according to some GamerGaters, it is.
They're wrong.
Mike.
There's no way to explain why somebody isn't a good person, doesn't behave professionally, doesn't behave ethically at their job unless you understand their motivations. It is not for us. We're not journalism professors. It is not for us to circumscribe, the adequate limits of disclosure. It is not for us to enforce rules that already exist.
Yes,
of
but
course, if somebody comes to you with a rape
here's the
claim,
point, Milo.
you should say,
You can keep
when did it
talking.
happen, and start to...
I could ask a question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. This discussion is supposed to be how GamerGate is going to communicate to mainstream journalists and how mainstream journalists are going to understand GamerGate. It's a two-way street. Hopefully what comes out of this, my aspirations are much more modest than yours. My aspirations...
I think what we're trying to say is, look...
I have an idea.
Yeah, go on.
I would say that as a writer and a philosopher, I'm always concerned with confirmation bias in myself. This tendency that we have to be very welcome and opening to anything that confirms your worldview, and very skeptical and dismissive of counter evidence. So you have to fight that as best you can. And what I have found that upset me with the way some people treated GamerGate was that they allowed their prejudices in favor of a particular narrative. They allowed it. Something's going off here. That can't be me.
This astonishing glittery appendage.
Shouldn't be. I think there wasn't enough skepticism about their own objectivity. Now, this is very hard, but I would just say that when you're writing a story, you have to correct for that. And I think most good journalists do, but I think when it comes to certain issues that are very pressing right now around gender, people just
We're not talking about gender.
No, but
We're not talking about gender today.
All right, but what you're asking us to do is give a laundry list of things journalists should be doing.
No, I was going to ask you
anyway.
some questions, but I haven't got that far yet.
ask away.
All right, these may be much more modest, small questions than you really want to hear, but here's one of the questions that I would love to hear you talk about and then these guys talk about. Covering GamerGate as a mainstream journalist means trying to do a lot what Len said, trying to source things, trying to get to the bottom of things. As journalists, we've covered things like Occupy Wall Street. Journalists are covering right now Black Lives Matter. These are two other movements that claim to be leaderless movements. So that's always a burden on journalists. Like, okay, that's what you are, but it makes it hard for me.
I've been doing it for a year. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. I just did the work. I don't know what you want me to tell you. I've listened to people who said that they knew.
This raises an interesting question. Do you put your reporting on Breitbart? Do you say that is news or opinion?
I think each piece is very obvious. It's very clear what it is. You can tell.
So
from
tell me,
it.
it's not clear to me, I'm an idiot. What is it?
Well, if it's a news reported piece, it has a lead which summarizes the story in a sentence or so. That it's reported.
You're writing on
it's
GamerGate,
reported
has it been news or opinion?
It's a mixture.
Okay, well, that's interesting because in the morning panel, that was a problem that GamerGate had, was the mixing. I
think it's a distraction. I don't think they really care about that.
Okay, well, I'm glad. I find it interesting that this is a leaderless movement, but you know how they feel.
No, I mean, I've interviewed, 200 of them for my book, so I have a reasonable idea of how most of the most active members feel, yeah.
Okay, I just run this little blog for AirPlay, and we had 60,000 unique users. So 200 is a reasonable sample size?
Well, it's a huge movement, obviously. But if you're asking us to just sort of say what journalists should be doing already, I mean, you could have got
the reason
much
I'm
less
asking,
qualified
Milo,
people to do that much better for you.
I'm not trying to impugn your work. I am trying to say that your work is different than the work that these guys will do. So to do the journalism that they need to do, it can't be a mixture. So they have different requirements.
Well, I've written straight news stories. I've written plenty of straight news stories, and to get the information for those straight news stories, I simply did my homework. I spoke to people. I hung out in Kotaku in Action. I did AMAs. I did all this stuff, 9 months before anybody else did it. I just did the work. It's not rocket science. It's just reporting like on any other sort of internet movement. It's all the same stuff,
No, but to
It's
be
not
fair,
that hard.
it does pose a special challenge when you have to interview people on an internet hashtag. But I will draw your attention to an excellent report by Brad Glasgow in Game Politics. And it's called Challenge Accepted, Interviewing an Internet Hashtag. And he charts a method for finding a critical mass of posters. Go find out where they are, listen to them, ask them, take a poll. What do you think are the most important issues? Where do you think the press has fallen down? And you will begin to get, sort of a consensus.
All right, let's take that point, something
Yeah.
I can actually latch onto for a change.
Okay.
So, Ren, if from an ethical standpoint, from teaching journalists as you do, how do you cover an online movement that it's mostly anonymous and it has no leaders? Christina is saying conduct a poll of those users. What does that get me?
That gets you the people who are in the place where you're asking the poll and who want to talk the most. There's no. You have to be scientific about something like that, or else, what are you getting?
He tried. I was just giving a few bits of information about what he did.
Was this the guy who asked then in Kotaku in Action? He did the poll that was posted on the top. Is that the guy? So you're getting guys from Reddit who are active users of this subreddit. There's still a decent chunk of the world who isn't on Reddit, believe it or not. I mean, it's such a small sample compared to what you're actually looking for.
But we know as journalists, once you have a sort of sketch of the architecture of a movement, we have a rough idea of how many people are on various different social networks. We know that in order to get a responsible sort of consensus impression, we need to visit these various websites and possibly weight them accordingly.
Well, that's not obvious to mainstream journalists because visiting a website doesn't mean. Sorry, go ahead, Ren.
How is that not obvious?
If we're going to, as mainstream journalists, go to a website and start quoting randomly from the users of that website?
I would never
That's
do
not
that.
what I suggested. I didn't say anything even remotely approaching that.
So talk to us as journalists about, we are going to cover a story. What's our
I'll give you an example. You were setting up this talk, right? You didn't get in touch with the only journalist who's been covering it for a year to ask who perhaps you could speak to in the course of who you might invite, who might be on the committee. I mean, these are basic stuff that you could do. You could ask other journalists who have done the work already. That's one thing you could do, right? It's one thing nobody did for this event. If you want to investigate an online movement, you have to work out where these people live. You do the work, and it takes a long time. It took me 3 months.
What do you mean work out where they live?
Sorry?
How do I work out where someone lives?
You ask them, and if they're not happy to talk to you about it, you keep asking other people. As you said, it's a movement of tens of thousands of people. You're going to find people that are prepared to talk to you. But we're very driven by the structure of the way that a news story is mapped out. The way that news editors ask for a story to be mapped out. That doesn't always translate very well to online stories.
Well, that's what we're trying to do here today.
Right. So individual anecdotes aren't massively helpful. You are at some point going to have to speak at the level of popularizations. You are at some point going to have to speak at the level of generalizations, and you're going to have to stand by that and hope that that is a fair reflection of the research that you've done. You are going to have to do some things like polls.
Kathy's got her hand up.
Yeah,
and she should talk.
I think also in terms of finding whom to interview about a hashtag movement, I think you just look, among other things, at the people who are most active in the hashtag, who have a lot of followers, who seem to sort of lead and dominate the conversation in the hashtag.
Hold on. Okay, so let's take that thought.
So like a leader?
Yeah.
Ooh, it sounds like a leader to me.
Well, a kind of influential member.
Somebody that's trusted.
Right.
Can I
Yes,
can I
please.
chime in here? Here's the thing. I mean, you can't script this stuff, and even though it's pretty obvious, what we talked about this earlier in the first panel. Okay, when somebody wants to do the right thing, if they're motivated to do the right thing, they don't need any coaching. That's the first thing. And what Nir was saying in his opening, eloquently enough, is that you have to do the work. If you want to write about something, you either do it the right way or you
If
have.
that's the answer, if just doing it the right way is the right answer, let's just go home now.
Well,
Because
no,
you guys aren't getting.
but hang on.
Hold on, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, these guys are sitting here smiling because I don't think anything has anything been said yet.
Can
that
I
is
just,
actually helpful
can I just,
to
you
a
know,
journalist? No, you can't.
You're interrogating a movement about how we should report.
you will, because
how
you
you
can.
guys should report on us. We're not responsible for telling you how to do your jobs.
And that's a fair point.
I think it, but I would say, how did you find us? You found us. Now, it would have been a good thing if the New York Times, the Washington Post, Vox, when they wrote, all you need to know about GamerGate, if they had sought out people that plausibly speak for it, or that the members of the hashtag would recognize as giving their perspective.
Look.
Now, you did it. I think this is great because I think this is a beginning. I think what's happening here today is what Cathy was saying, is that, the press hasn't done a good job, and now we could turn a corner here by journalists coming and seeing that GamerGate was a failure.
Look, I appreciate you guys supporting your own viewpoints, but I'm just going to make a guess here that everything that's been said so far today from you guys is zero helpful for a mainstream journalist. But if I'm wrong, you guys tell me.
No, I would agree to the extent, and as I said in the first panel, I'm not very familiar with GamerGate, as I think actually, even though there are a lot of people involved, there are a lot of people who have no idea what it is. And there are probably a lot of journalists that have no idea what it is. So when you're citing and talking about the New York Times and talking about someone else doing it wrong, I don't know even what they did that is wrong. So I guess that, to me, not knowing that, I can't respond. I can't kind of say maybe this is how they should have done it differently or anything like that, because I really don't know even what they did.
If you were working at your station, we're going to write about GamerGate, and then heard a large discussion about feminism, is that the same story or a different story?
So for our viewers, that's too much in one story. It is. It's too much to include in one story. We have, certain time constraints, and not all the time, and a time constraint is not an excuse. Sometimes we tell 5-minute pieces, but even in 5 minutes to tell GamerGate and bring in feminism, it's too many points in one thing.
What I'm hearing is that mainstream media is structurally incapable of covering GamerGate fairly, so the best thing is this, they leave it alone.
Well,
So what you're saying is it's sort of, there's this architecture around news packages and the way a story is structured so that you can never tell the truth about this movement. So
Milo, let's stipulate, can we just stipulate something amongst us right now, just between us and everybody? You can hate the way the media works, and we can admit as part of the media we don't always like all the systems that are in place ourselves, but it is the system that we got, and we are not powerful enough people within that system to change it. So we're trying to have a discussion here today about how we can do better, except you've spent most of your time talking about how awesome you are. So I would like...
That doesn't sound very likely.
I know. It surprised me too. So I'll give you an example. You were talking, Christina, about how this event came to be. I spent 3 months, most of my free time, and my wife not very happy with GamerGate, to do that. A reporter doesn't have 3 months to work on a story like this. Milo, I've read all of Milo's stuff. It is indeed a mix of opinion and news. So it is not something that can be replicated by the mainstream media. In fact, I think sometimes the mix goes one way or the other. It's not an even mix. So for instance, when you write about Randy Harper, I actually talked to someone in anti-GamerGate, a name you would know, I'm not going to tell you, who actually thought that that reporting was actually pretty good. And that same person, of course, hates a lot of what else you write because it is not journalism, it's opinion writing like we talked about this morning. You doing your thing on your website is awesome, but it is not easily transportable to what these guys have to do. You guys talking about feminism, which is a great story unto itself, that I can see both sides, I mean, it has multiple sides to it and a lot of rich stuff to get into, isn't this story. And just by virtue of what you've done here today, I think it's a very telling example. I let you guys talk for as long as you talked because I can tell you this, and if I'm wrong, these journalists will tell me, that if that was my introduction as a reporter to GamerGate, and this is my first time reaching out to you, I am not doing that story. Not because I don't want to do the story, I don't believe you, I have an ulterior motive, but because I have other good stories I can do.
Then I think
better.
you're going to find GamerGate's going to give up on the mainstream media because this is not a story that can be
And
told
GamerGate
that soon. And it pretty much has. And actually, the conditions for success for GamerGate don't require positive
Okay,
headlines.
well, and Milo said this is an interesting point you raised because I've talked to
if I
other,
can,
hold on 1 second, please. I'll let you guys talk. I'm trying to get through you guys so we can have this conversation. Milo, so I talked to a lot of GamerGate people, as you have advised, on streams and everything else, and said, listen, we don't have to do the second half of this debate today, because if you want to remain a dark subculture, you can. In fact, there are some SPJers here. We were at a conference of furries, and that is a culture that does not want mainstream journalistic attention. But me and those journalists, including the former
What are
managing-
they?
Furries.
You know the people who dress up
I'm just looking at her face as she's getting that explanation.
still frozen in place.
But as Milo and Christina, as an example, we went to in fact, I was with the former managing editor of the Cleveland Plains Dealer, and we talked to them about, we're journalists, and what they want or don't want out of media, how they feel misunderstood by TV shows like Law & Order. Furries have been on Law & Order. They want to remain a darker subculture. They don't strive for media attention. Now,
Okay.
Milo, you say you know everybody in GamerGate.
No, I didn't say
I can
that.
tell you.
I didn't say that.
You
My
speak for
God,
everyone
is
in
this how you
GamerGate.
quote in your
said
journalism?
you speak
Good
for everyone in
grief.
GamerGate. You said you speak for everyone in GamerGate.
No, I did not say that. I didn't say anything approaching it. Is this how you quote in your journalism? My God.
Yes, it is.
I did not say anything approaching that.
Guys, as somebody who's supposed to be neutral, I just want to say something.
Hold on, let me finish this
Mike,
thought.
Mike, no, hang on, Mike, hang on. Mike, let's do this. Listen, what you're doing is exactly the reason why GamerGate is portrayed improperly in the media, because you're not allowing the narrative to be focused on what the problem is.
You're right, I'm not
How
allowing the
they
narrative
put
to
it
focus
is
on what
irrelevant.
It's outside the narrative, so you can't process it.
I am going to try to finish this point so we can talk about the journalism of it. The furry culture wants to remain private. In talking to GamerGate in the past 3 months, there have been some who have said and tweeted at me and emailed me that they don't want mainstream media attention, and I respect that. There were many more that said that they did. And in those conversations, we talked about how we have to kind of meet in this middle. GamerGate is probably going to have to change the way it talks, not change its message. Selling out does not mean, or you can interrupt me again and I'll just go ahead. No, go ahead. I mean,
Wait, actually, can I say something? Because this isn't just GamerGate. I mean, this goes with everything. Like, if you want the media's attention, there's a certain, you approach them a certain way. By attacking them, it's probably not going to be the best way to do it. That's not the best way to get anyone's attention, in my opinion.
It was
But-
probably super difficult because obviously
Milo, you know
one of
what?
the-
Can you not
I'm
interrupt her when
disagreeing.
she's talking? Thanks.
No, but I
Because,
think,
you know, that would be sexist.
well, when someone comes to me with a story, they tell me whatever they might want to tell me. I ask certain questions, and we have conversations in my newsroom about if we're going to cover it. A lot of that depends on what's the outcome and what's the public's interest. How does this benefit the public in any way? How is this going to maybe make the community better? Is this going to expose something? And specifically, this is investigations. And if the answer is it's not going to help, or by us telling this, it's only going to help maybe one person, we're less likely to maybe do it. Those are the kind of the pros and cons that we weigh. We're here for more of the public good, kind of wide range things. So I guess my question to you would be, if you came to me and you want me to write about Gamergate, what am I writing about and why?
Well, this is the problem, because the stated purpose of Gamergate is to to protest bad ethics in journalism. So there's already that sort of opposition. So I understand what you're saying. It's difficult because Gamergate's default position is journalists are crap. Can you write about how journalists are crap? So obviously that makes the starting
How does
position
that relate
very
to
difficult.
Gamergate? See, I guess that's where compared to the conversation that we had with the other panel,
Yeah.
that wasn't at all the understanding that I took about Gamergate, but maybe it wasn't
Can you
journalists
expand
are
on that?
crap. And
No, I'm
that's
being
what you should
flippant,
write
obviously.
about. I know, but I guess that was not the takeaway. So
I have a question. I can understand the reluctance of an editor to give the go-ahead for a story that's so amorphous, but it did not stop editors from writing with great authority about something they knew nothing about. There were many stories, hundreds of stories about Gamergate. They all followed the same storyline of women who were imperiled and bad gamers. And this was written over and over and over again. No one had the least inhibition. It just simply didn't occur to them to go to the other side. Maybe there wasn't another side.
I kind of want to reiterate what Christina said, because I think the problem is not even so much that the media didn't cover Gamergate, it's that they covered it from a very one-sided standpoint, which is, Gamergate is a misogynist harassment campaign.
What if we stipulate, how about this, to try to move past this? What if we stipulate to everything bad that happened in the past? We don't even know all of it, but we're just going to give it to you. And can we talk about how to be better in the future? What if we just admit that we all sucked in the past?
Let's mention there were some wonderful examples. There were reporters like Eric Kane and Auerbach at Slate.
David Auerbach at Slate.
Who did a wonderful job.
Yeah.
Who tried to get the story and sought people out. They're models of how to cover. And once I saw that, I thought, okay, this is going to catch on. It didn't catch on.
Okay, these are good examples. So this is something we can sink our teeth into. So I talked to David Auerbach at Slate, and Eric Kane. Obviously, I've emailed him, and their beats allow them to do something a little different than other mainstream journalists. I think this is an important distinction, and you guys can back me up. That David Auerbach's beat at Slate, he's a tech writer. So he doesn't always write about Gamergate, but he can write about Gamergate.
Right.
Interestingly, at Slate, there is also a culture editor. And the culture editor can sometimes write about Gamergate. Interestingly, they can have totally different opinions when you read their piece.
Yeah.
Because they have beats. They have something that they cover all the time. Eric Kane, same thing. What we're trying to get at here is mainstream journalists who don't have those beats. Because those beats mean that you are reaching a certain audience that's interested in tech or interested in what that culture writer is saying, because that culture writer might do it the same way Milo does with a mixture. We're talking with Ren and Lynn about assigning general reporters to go cover this movement and to do that better and to do the reporting better. So what we're asking you guys is to talk to these guys about how to do that. So let's just leave behind all the stuff that happened before, because we weren't there for it, so we don't know who was right or wrong. And let's talk about how to do it better. So let me ask you a direct question. Getting back to writing a story about Gamergate. If I'm going to write a story about the year anniversary of Gamergate, which is coming up, you know, guys, Milo, you know this, journalists love anniversary stories, right? It's an easy way to get into a topic. It's the 1-year anniversary of whatever it is. If I was going to write a 1-year anniversary story on Gamergate, who should I talk to? If I'm Lynn Walsh and I'm assigning a story, who should she tell the reporter to go see first?
Well, it's a story about press ethics, so you should go and talk to the journalists who are accused of ethical failings. You should look at the go to speak to the editors-in-chief of Kotaku and Polygon, ask them why they changed their disclosure.
Okay, hold on a second, Milo. She's looking at you like she's confused.
yeah, I guess that completely loses me. And again, this is someone who is not involved in the movement. And are there multiple people? Is this one person? I guess that's is there one person? Are there multiple people that I should be talking to? Are these multiple publications? Are these reporters? Are these gamers? Are they editors? Are they news organization presidents? I mean, who are these people?
I guess, Milo, what she's saying is you're asking her to start a story on Gamergate by not talking to Gamergate. You're saying to go talk to game editors. That's what you said.
Yeah, no, I would say,
How did you do it?
How did I do it? I mean, I talked to a lot of GamerGate people on Twitter, and I kind of tried to get a sense of who the people were.
Tell us how you did that. Tell us, like, you go on Twitter and you see just all these posts. Did you break it down on a spreadsheet? And if everyone had been doing it for 9 months, it was okay, but if for 2 days you didn't, if it was an egg account, tell us like some secrets.
Right. Well, I don't think there are any. I mean, you watch the hashtag for a few days. You try to see like who the most articulate posters are. You try to see, who is getting retweeted. You try to see, who's sort of more visible.
So you found one of those people, and what'd you do next?
Message them on Twitter and ask them if they would like to be interviewed. I spoke to several women, by the way, who were involved in this movement.
Okay, so when you DM'd them, and did you conduct the interview? Did they ever get their real name, or did you keep them anonymous?
The people that I spoke to, I did get their real names, yeah. And some of them were not willing to have their real names mentioned. I think most of them were. Also, I think the other thing is just to actually watch what gets posted in the hashtag, because again, I think a lot of people who wrote about Gamergate, using the standard narrative, didn't really look at the posts in the hashtag so much as, again, they went with this preset narrative. And
if you wanted some advice, for example, it'd be good maybe to do what you did, which is actually watch what's happening. It's kind of when I was being glib, I was being glibber, and I said I did the work.
No.
And that's kind of what I meant, right? Rather than just sort of looking at what other journalists write and say, when every other journalist has a very strong opinion on a subject, and all of those opinions are pointing in the same direction, that makes people like me suspicious. And that's the kind of brain that I think journalists are supposed to have. And it makes me go, what's going on here? So, somebody came to me and said, this might be a story you're interested in, and I did what Cathy did.
So let's drill down on that. So one of the things that mainstream journalists have an issue with is obviously we have to get people on the record. So you're saying that if the journalists reach out to people on Twitter, you could probably get a fair number of them to be committed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's not just Twitter, actually. There are also people on YouTube who have done videos that are pro-Gamergate that you can
They're very
reach.
media friendly.
There are
They're used to
bloggers,
talking. They're very
yeah.
articulate.
All right, so because I want to get to these guys.
Right.
The question is, if I reach someone on Twitter and I think they're articulate, and I talk to them and I quote them, how many of those people do I need, or what can I actually quote them saying? Because now I'm saying that I'm asking them questions about how they feel about some movement that has no leaders. I don't know how to put that in context. So let me ask you, when you actually interviewed one of these people, what did they actually say? Just give me one example of someone you quoted by name. What did you quote them saying? What was their message?
Okay, well, it's going to be about feminism again, because one of the best people that I've interviewed was a British woman named Sabrina Harris, who's a technical writer who's involved in Gamergate. And I specifically asked her, what does she think about the perception that this is a backlash against women in gaming?
And then she gave you your opinion.
She gave me her opinion. She told me about her experiences as a female gamer and, her view of the type of ideology.
I hear you. So now my question is this.
You interrupted a woman.
I'm fine. No, I think I'm done with my point.
Hold on.
Sorry, he told me off for it. You should tell him off for it.
I will repeat this from the morning, that this is not for Gamergate. This is for journalists and their readers. So I understand, I totally get it, that this is a Gamergate crowd and you want to hear them talk about these issues. And I don't even got a problem with that. It's just that's not what this debate is. If that's what it's going to become, it can certainly become that, but it won't achieve the ends that you guys said that you wanted, which is to give these guys some idea about how to do their job a little bit better. I'm not interrupting them because I agree with them, I disagree with them, or I'm offended. I am just feeling, and maybe I'm wrong, but I can talk to some of the other journalists that I know are in this room. I don't know that it's helping that cause. So I'm going to try one more time. And frankly, if you guys feel that that's the conversation you want to have, you can have that conversation for the rest of the time that we're going to do this. I will just tell you this. It won't have the ends that you think it will. I think the morning debate, I think we actually had some things we could try to do. Again, those may be modest goals. You guys have loftier ambitions. But I felt like we made some progress in the morning. Ask yourselves, you don't have to say anything now or you can yell at me. Do you feel like we made that much progress here today? This is not about reconfirming your own beliefs. This is about trying to talk to these guys. So I'm not interrupting her because I'm trying to shout her down. I'm interrupting her because I want to try to get the information as quickly as possible. She did something cool, and I'm trying to get that over here. So
Okay.
let me ask one question about this
Okay.
woman you interviewed, which sounds really good.
Okay.
And it sounds really basic to these guys or anyone listening
Right.
on stream. Of course we
Okay.
would talk, but that's not common. We are always taught that like anonymity on social media, people guard that with their lives. But let me ask you one question. So this woman, she talked to you, it was a good quote. Did you talk to a woman on Twitter that felt that it was a misogynistic movement? I mean, did you get the opposite of this woman in that story?
Not anyone that I interviewed personally, but let me tell you why. Because the other point of view was already, I mean, I was in a way doing a counterpoint to a story that had been done many, many times. And I think, the other point of view was represented very well. So in a sense, my objective was to do the counterpoint.
Okay,
and
so-
I did summarize a lot of the arguments that were being made for, by people who felt that it was
All right.
a misogynist harassment campaign. I mentioned the people who said that they were being harassed. And, so I think I certainly included the other point of view in that sense.
Okay, well,
but,
so let me get
my-
back to these guys, because it's my understanding from our world that if she's going to go do that really cool thing, talking to one side, she's got to do the same cool thing, talking to the other side, not just sum it up from other media. If you guys were doing this story, would you do what she did, get the person she got, but also try to get the other side the same way?
I mean, I absolutely would try to get the other side and get it the same way. I mean, when we put a story together, we try to give both sides, if we can, while we're telling it, equal treatment. So if we have one person coming out against the government on camera, we want to get the government on camera as well. Unfortunately, sometimes the government doesn't go on camera, so we end up with a statement. But then we put the statement inside the package, not just as the tag. I mean, we do think about those kind of things. And I think as a good journalist, if you're trying to do it right and give the story justice for the public, that's the way you would do it.
So let me,
Right. So, well, I'm certainly not saying that the way that I did it is the way that it should be done by, everyone. I mean, I was doing it from I guess you would say, more something of an opinion standpoint, in that, my point was to say, I think the story has been misrepresented. Here's the other side of it. So, certainly if I was approaching this as a kind of new story that, that I was trying to get from different points of view, yeah, definitely. I mean, I was knowingly coming into this from that perspective of saying, here's the other side of a story
Right,
that
but I
I think
guess
has
so-
been misrepresented. So, that's, I certainly wouldn't suggest that, people who do the story should not try to talk to both sides. I mean,
Mike, can I
absolutely.
pitch in here for a second? It says here, I'm going to quote, "How should the mainstream media cover online-only controversy?" We've been here for over an hour. We haven't even touched on that yet.
Okay.
And the reason for
I know.
Yeah, and well, here's the thing. I'm not a journalist. I'm just a game developer and a gamer. I was a gamer first before everything else. The issue here is very simple. If the media wants to report on anything, first of all, I just feel bad that these two people are sitting here and they have to answer these questions about something they're not very familiar with, which puts them at a disadvantage. I'm a gamer. Nir knows a lot more about this stuff than I think everybody in this room, because he's done a lot of research on it, as Suzanne and everybody else has done. But the problem here is this. Trying to say writing a story is one thing. If there's an oil spill, okay, you can write about an oil spill. You can find who to ask, you can take pictures, you can do all these things. But trying to report on something like GamerGate it's difficult.
Well, that's why we're here, Derek.
But here's the thing. Well, hang on. I understand that, but you keep asking this question and putting them on the spot, knowing fully well that it's a loaded question, and there's no way to answer it without falling afoul of whatever it is you think they should be saying. And here's
kinda like
why.
what-
Which is the reason why.
have to agree
Which is
with you.
no, hang on. Which is the reason why. When this whole thing became GamerGate, and it stopped being about somebody's personal affairs, and the media found themselves in the firing line, it became the target, the first thing they did was they hit back. Now we have all these stories about harassment and feminism, blah, 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 which had nothing to do with ethics.
Let me try it this way. For mainstream reporters to interview GamerGate, tell me if this is a dumb idea, okay? And I'm sure you will. It's a leaderless movement. I can try to do some of what you did, Cathy, if I'm Ren or Lynn, but that's still going to get me what's called anecdotal leads. Like, it's going to get me a person.
Okay.
There are, in a leaderless movement, they don't want leaders, even spokesmen. They do have something called e-celebs, which I've learned. So what if Ren and Lynn were to do a story on the year anniversary of GamerGate, and the first calls they would make would be to Oliver Campbell, Sargon of Akkad, and these other YouTube streamers. What if that was where they started, and they wanted to ask them about their opinions on GamerGate? Would that be...
They'd be doing a damn sight more than CBS, the BBC, any number of other
New York
broadcast
Times.
networks,
I think
any
that
number
would
of
be good.
national
It would be
newspapers.
excellent,
They'd be doing a hell of a lot more than any other national broadcast or print media ever bothered to do. You're here saying to Cathy, why didn't you get the alternative opinion? Because she was doing a reactive piece. She was doing a reactive piece precisely because the mainstream media did none of what you're talking about.
Okay, well,
they didn't go to anybody at all. And now
we're
you're dragging
stipulating that
GamerGate
it's
on stage saying, if you like, the sort of press is putting GamerGate on stage and saying, how can we not screw you over again? Tell us how we did it really badly and what to do next. You know, it's a very strange format, which I think is the result, which is the root of the problems you're having here.
Well, Milo, we weren't there for what happened before. So if you talk, here's
It's
what...
very difficult when the other side does. You know, you brought in
We're not the
journalists
other
who are
side.
celebrated and professionals, but don't know anything about GamerGate. I mean, what are we? How much can we realistically expect to accomplish?
Okay, well, I'll try to answer that. Reporters have to do stories all the time where they, especially general assignment reporters, that's the title for it. I was one myself, where you have to go in and parachute in and do a story and get out of the story. We're not the expert, but that's okay because we're writing for other people who aren't experts either. Sometimes, as you guys just demonstrate here today, before your audience, you guys all understand these issues. The people that don't, a lot of this is getting lost on them. So sometimes it's a really good idea to have a reporter that doesn't know much, that knows a lot about journalism, but doesn't know a lot about the topic at hand. Because they're going to ask you a lot of dumb questions, because those are what their readers are going to ask. So let me just get back to my point, which is, would it be helpful for someone like SPJ or some other person to make a list of all the streams? These are people that this audience probably knows really well, but a journalist just parachuting
I think it would
in
be
this-
helpful. I think the problem is that GamerGate, on its own merits, isn't particularly newsworthy. The thing that's newsworthy about it is these threats, some of which are obviously real and some of
Okay,
which
well,
aren't.
don't forget
But
that the story that we're going to do is the year anniversary of GamerGate. So it is an opportunity to talk about everything. The problem for the reporter is how to get that
I
stuff.
think by far the best thing you could do is go to the
celebs
people you
would be
mentioned.
really good, yeah. I think there's a bunch of names. There's some of the people you mentioned. I think Liz Finnegan would be a great person to talk to.
But it takes like a day to find out who these people are. It takes
she's a
24
blog.
hours
She
to
now
find out who these
writes a
people are. Why
blog
did nobody
on,
do
Sounds
it?
like we've got
on
a first
video game
step.
issues.
Let's
All
go
right,
ahead and do it.
so let me go back to, let me just turn this over to you two. So you are going to assign a story on the year anniversary of GamerGate. What do you, based on what you even know now, what would you do? How would you do this? What do you do first or second?
Sounds like we should contact these people. I mean, so as a reporter who knows nothing about any, I've been in that position where I was a general assignment reporter and I had to go out and cover the thing. And what I do first is, go to a source that I trust and get some background. It sounds like in this case, I'm not sure who to trust, so I guess I would start by finding these e-celeb people and seeing what they have to say. But I mean, within a journalist purview, within the modern journalism world, the one we're in right now, it sounds like that would take a lot of time, and I can see why the story doesn't get written that often, because who has the time to do all that right now,
Well, I'm a busy guy. I did it. I mean, Cathy
Well,
did
okay,
it.
but
There are
your
plenty of people
beats,
who've done it,
that's-
and there are
that's
plenty
your
of people. There are
beats.
plenty of people who've done
that's your
this.
thing.
Well,
I
what
don't really
I-
understand the questions we're being asked.
Can Lynn,
People have
can you
done
guys,
it.
can Lynn talk?
Cathy did it.
I would say, and this is nothing against Ren, but I would hate for time. I always tell my reporters, I don't want time to be an issue. If it's a good story, we're going to figure something out. And yes, does that mean that some stories then don't get told? Yes. And does it happen every time? No, it doesn't happen every time. But we like to try to get it to happen. I think with GamerGate, especially in mainstream media, it's what's that plug? Why does like my mom watching at home care? And that's what I need to kind of jump off of.
I don't think there is one.
Well, and that doesn't mean that it doesn't deserve to be covered, but that means that it may just continue to be covered maybe in these niche kind of trade publications, kind of like auto stuff, auto reviews. You don't see that on, daily, 5 o'clock news shows, which I think people are okay with. But if the mainstream media does jump in and cover it, I am completely on the page that they should do it well, they should do it ethically, they should get both sides, and all of that should happen. I mean, I think that's something we all agree with, and if it wasn't done, which you guys are saying that way in the past, as a journalist, I don't like to see that. No one likes to see that because that makes us all look bad. So,
Yeah, if I can add something here, the mainstream media didn't really have to cover GamerGate at all, but if they were going to cover it, I think it was their obligation to cover it fairly. They could have just not written anything, but instead they went with this very one-sided narrative of several people saying that they had been threatened by GamerGate, that they had been harassed by GamerGate, when there was never any evidence produced that these threats actually came from anyone associated with GamerGate.
We're stipulating that we weren't around for that.
Yeah, but I mean, you're asking me what the media did wrong, and
I'm
how
asking what
should the
should be
media have
happening
covered
moving
it?
forward.
So if they were going to cover it at all, I think they definitely should have gone to some people who were known to be associated with GamerGate, in one way or another,
Well,
and try to get their point of view.
So let me ask you,
that's,
since you guys seem in agreement, varying degrees of skepticism, that this can be covered, but if we compile a list of the people that do streams and their followers, so that gives the journalists some sense for credibility, because numbers, we need facts, what else can we do? What else can we do to reach out?
Can I ask a question? Like, how should if you were to come to GamerGate, Gar, if you were going to ask on the hashtag, maybe woman X has said that she is receiving death threats and harassment, right? How would you want an internet movement to express to you what they want to say, which is she's a professional provocateur, she's lying, and this isn't what the story is about, without totally turning off journalists? Because every time I say that to people privately, I see them recoil in horror and be like, well, you can't say that, there's no way to prove it. Well, no, there's no way to prove that it was true or it wasn't true. And if the only thing you're interested in is this harassment thing, which is not really what GamerGate is about, what should GamerGate do in response to those sorts of questions?
I mean, I think tell the truth. I mean, that's the number one thing. Can you point to facts? Can you send us tweets that maybe this person has done this before? What kind of proof do you have that maybe this person who's saying that she was harassed, if you believe that it's not true and you know that it's not true, what kind of proof do you have that you can bring to us? And we would be doing, as a good journalist, we'd be looking on both sides. So if you bring us that, we also would be fact-checking that side,
so
but
the issue is
also
nobody
looking
did,
at her.
and the issue is on these internet cases, it's not provable one way or the other. Nobody can say with any certainty or with even any particular confidence whether something happened or did not happen. So the media just takes a default position.
Or who
just
did it?
Yeah, and I think actually,
believe the woman,
if it
and
happened,
whoever she says did it. Run it on the front page of the New
I
York
think
Times.
this also goes to the issue of covering online movements specifically, because in any online controversy, you usually have trolls and kind of professional provocateurs and troublemakers kind of glomming onto it. So there has certainly been some ugly stuff surrounding GamerGate. A lot of it was directed at both sides. A lot of it came allegedly from these, troll nests somewhere in the deep recesses of the internet. And, and I think to pin those on this movement, on this hashtag, I do think was very unfair. And I think that kind of goes to the issue of how do you cover online movements. I mean, you really have to look at the possibility that some of the behavior that is being alleged doesn't really come from members of the movement, but from people who are trolling both sides. And I think that specifically goes to
How do you
movements.
show who the trolls are?
That's not it. I mean, there are people who have dedicated a lot of time to tracking them down.
The FBI is trying to find that out.
But there are also a lot of, see, it's a difficult issue because it's people are also afraid to talk about this because they know that if they do, I mean, I've had people contact me with information saying, well, you can write about this, but, don't mention me, and, and also if you write about this, these trolls will probably go after you and, put
all right,
your
so
home
let me
address
do
online.
this.
That's not
so
new.
that's-
That's not new to GamerGate, though.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
cannot tell you how many times someone contacts me with information and says, if you write about this, someone's going to come after you. I mean, it happens with a lot of stuff. So that's not just
So how do
GamerGate.
you handle that?
But it's not often in a story that a reporter will get an unsheathed syringe through his front door and a dead animal with a razor blade in its neck.
No, we have journalists that get killed.
Yeah, well, yeah, when they report in war zones, sure, or on terrorism, but not on video games.
Or on soccer in
You
Eastern
know,
Europe.
not in the
Happened to a journalist in Eastern Europe who reported on a soccer match the wrong way.
I didn't catch that, sorry.
It also happens to journalists in Eastern Europe who report on soccer matches the wrong way. It happened like last
And
week.
by the way,
We're talking about the entertainment
the
industry here.
vituperative comments and menacing and threats, it's not the worst among gamers. I think it might be among threads with opera fans.
Really?
No idea. Those
Oh
old
my
Wagner fans, these old queens, they go for each other. They are so mean, honestly.
Well, let me ask the journalists. So, and you guys tell me what you think of this. So, in compiling AirPlay, there's a guy that actually was like a troll patrol for the event, and I found this quite fascinating. He found some documentation. I can't say any more than that, where some trolls were talking to each other and basically saying, we're going to pose as GamerGate and mess up AirPlay. And one of the responses was, I think I got enough credentials in GamerGate to make that work. Like, they obviously spent time creating a profile so that they would be a credible source to the world, I guess journalists, anybody. And I guess in this culture, which I'm not familiar with, they said, I'm going to dox Koretsky with all this information. And I guess what's supposed to happen is that the trolls are all supposed to go, yeah, and they're all supposed to get excited and go for it. But in this instance, I guess the response was tepid, and the doxing was itself tepid too. So I guess the question to you is, one, how would journalists go about enlisting someone like this troll patrol kind of thing, where they're not going to be able to be quoted, but they can give you some information, but I don't know what you can do with it. And number two, when you get that information, how would you actually write about that?
I mean, I just personally am not a fan of anonymous sources. That is like last resort. It's just not something that I believe in as a team, and we sort of try to completely stray away from it. I like to put a face to a name to a face. I like to show people's faces. I mean, obviously, victims and stuff, we have, kind of different considerations, but that would all be sort of background information that would be in the back of my head that would just lead to more research. I would probably say that none of that would go in any sort of news piece that I would put together.
Right, that's just like an interesting part to something bigger. That doesn't feel like a story to me on its face.
So here's the other interesting part of that. If they're willing to go to that length to create an account, then you could do what Cathy did, and you could be wrong. You could get burned.
Right.
So Cathy, there's no way to avoid that, right? I mean, if somebody is going to be that dedicated to...
Yeah, and honestly, going into the story, I actually did have some concern that I would, contact the wrong person and end up being the target of trolls. It hasn't happened, but, it was certainly a risk. And, I think you kind of watch people and their behavior for a little bit before you contact them and kind of try to get a sense of whether they're
How long
reliable.
did this take you? How many hours do you think you invested to get this piece?
Oh gosh, it's really difficult for me to estimate that because I'm also usually working on 2 or 3 different stories at the same time. But I think I spent about a week watching the hashtag very closely, and I looked at a number of these video streams on YouTube and blog posts, and I think that was enough for me to kind of get a sense of which people I considered to be fairly reliable sources. So, that's really the best answer I can give.
It's a good rule of thumb. I mean, look, GamerGate is unique in the history of hashtag social movements in that it is not allowed to define itself. Journalists define GamerGate for it. They say it is a misogynistic hate movement against women, unique among all movements.
We're not saying that.
No, I'm saying journalists have done that traditionally.
Well, we're not talking about what journalists have done before.
Well,
We've stipulated that we're not going to, we give you that one.
Okay, well...
For purposes of this discussion.
Fine. Let's avoid some of the mistakes that have been made in the past. Now, if I can't mention what those mistakes were in the past, it's difficult for me to give you advice for the future, isn't it?
I wouldn't think so, but okay. All right, let me offer a piece. Let me offer a suggestion, and then maybe you guys can add your own. So journalists like to interview people. So I talked to. What? You're going to argue with me on that, or okay? Just checking. We'll see how long that lasts. They like to interview people. So I talked to a guy that does the GamerGate meetups in Boston and asked him, would your meetup people be averse to a journalist attending that? Say that I am with a Boston publication and I got an assignment to do a GamerGate story. And he said, no, you could come out and talk to us. So that would be one way, right? There are meetups all around the country.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
I did the same thing in Paris. I mean, look, GamerGate has got fatigue about this now. They're not as worried now because they know that journalists are going to screw them over no matter what. So, you know, the last one, I was in one in Paris, I think 2 months ago, and somebody came down from, is it Le Monde, or one of the big Parisian newspapers, came down, spoke to everybody, deliberately ignored all of the people there that he recognized who knew might give him articulate answers, you know, to what GamerGate was really all about, and then just went for the young, bewildered-looking kids. You know, GamerGate knows this is going to happen. We know that when a journalist, you know, like I say we, I guess I should probably just give into this now and say we. You know, GamerGate knows, you know, that when a journalist comes, it's almost always to do a hit piece. They sort of got fatigue about this now. Yeah, if you want to come down and do yet another piece about how we're all dicks, fine, come do it. You know, they don't care anymore. As far as the interviewing anonymous people goes, that is just a reality of reporting on the internet age, and you're going to have to get used to it.
do you agree?
You'll be wrong more often, but you just got to get used to it.
No, I mean, I still am uncomfortable interviewing anonymous people. This game designer guy who stood up in the front row and, you know, shared his face and talked earlier, awesome. GamerGate needs more people like that to come out and actually speak with us and to show their faces and to show they're not afraid of this. You know, we need people to stand up, or else we're not comfortable interviewing them.
But we have a vested interest in this because we want named people for our stories. This poor dude's going to get his family dogs.
Yeah, let me also can I give a specific example of a story that I think was badly done?
Well, no, why are we going to talk about something that's been badly done? We didn't do it. We want to, let's keep this conversation going. This is good.
No, I mean, I think that's a good point because, I mean, when I go to even my boss and I say, oh, I have this great story on GamerGate, no one's using their name, and I had to only shoot their hands, and they're making all these accusations against different people that I actually don't know who they are either, but it involves some companies. He's going to look at me and say, absolutely not. But because someone's going to see that piece and be like, what? Who are these people? Who are they talking about? It's confusing for the viewer too.
I understand that, but that's what the internet is. You know, if the structures of the publication or your sort of editors or ethical standards or requirements for reporting can't cope with anonymous forums and internet movements, you can't report on them. You just stop reporting on them.
Yeah, but
you're not equipped to report on them otherwise.
Hang on. Here's
I
the
don't
thing.
think it's
I
just
think
an issue of that.
One thing I want to mention about this is the reason why people like their anonymity is because they don't want to get attacked. GamerGate is not about, you know, some 15-year-old kid sitting in his room playing video games. I have friends who support the movement. These are top-notch developers. I know that there's people in academia. I mean, these people don't want to put their face to it simply because of the way the media has portrayed this movement as being this, you know, based on, you know, harassment, abuse, blah, blah, blah. So I think asking to have faced and named people to talk about and represent a movement that doesn't want to be represented by any leader, it's just a waste of time. I mean, that's the reason why the media has anonymous sources. But hang on, yeah, but that's the reason why the media has anonymous sources. Okay, let me give you an example. If I went online, if I said right now, hey, you know what? I'm GamerGate, blah, blah, blah. There's going to be 1 million stories next week. And I have to deal with that.
Well, it's because we know who you are.
Exactly.
Hold on 1 second. Let me just get back to Lynn and Ren. Ren, let me ask you. An anonymous source in a newspaper, who knows the name of that person?
Probably just the journalist and his or her editor.
So an anonymous source in a publication is not anonymous to the journalist. Not anonymous to, and by the way,
Never.
the reporter isn't allowed just to keep it to themselves. The editor has to know who it is. You guys want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, I think that maybe is the difference when we talk about anonymous. So if someone from GamerGate, if I talked to them and I sat and even met them for coffee, we had a conversation. And maybe I didn't use their name in publication. They're not anonymous to me. They're not, my editor knows who they are. I probably also, well, I definitely normally, if we do this and I get approval, I'm self-verifying who they are by looking up maybe an address to see who they might else know, where they live, making sure it's valid. I also probably, if I'm going to use an anonymous source, am going to meet in person. As much as they may not feel comfortable with that, I'm not just gonna have a phone call, because that could be anyone. So I think there is a difference between being anonymous online completely and not even then being willing to tell me your identity and I'm reporting on you versus you telling me and then you're anonymous in my story.
That's completely fair. I mean, my experience, a lot of what are called trolls are mostly just kids who are bored, who are posting memes and jokes and broing out and having a bit of banter, and they're neither here nor there. The people who are anonymous because they need to be for their personal safety, and journalists got who the victim was in GamerGate completely the wrong way around. You know, the people who needed to remain anonymous for their professional lives, in my experience, have been very happy to acquiesce to stuff like that, and I've done that with many of them.
But also, the other thing about being anonymous is, you know, if it's about trust. If you go to a reporter at the New York Times and you have a really hot story and you want to be anonymous, but he wants to meet with you, this is the New York Times. It's about trust. Gamers don't trust the gaming media, period.
Yeah, we're not talking about the gaming media, though. We're going to talk about mainstream media.
They don't trust you either.
Yeah, well,
I
if
know.
I can,
Well, I was going to say that actually...
With every reason, with every justification not to trust the mainstream
I know.
media, because they have been burned over and over again.
And as a journalist, that honestly does break my heart and is so upsetting because I do love what I do. And I know that, look, every journalist is not a good journalist. I wish that they were. But I know. But, I mean, honestly, I do hope, and I know maybe you won't, but I really do hope that you get a chance to work with a good journalist who really does care, and that you maybe give some people a chance and maybe help them along the way if you have to.
I think
because that does hurt to hear. I mean,
part of the
there
problem
are
is,
some
you
good
know,
ones out there.
I've worked with great journalists in my career. You know, I started at a national newspaper. You know, I was a regular kind of news desk reporter, you know, for a little while. You know, I've worked with good people, and many of the best journalists tend not to want to cover stories like this. For a variety of obvious reasons. But, you know, I think from GamerGate's point of view, they're not looking out at other media and saying, well, there's some bad guys and some good guys. They're looking at the media and saying, where are the good guys?
yeah, well, if I think I actually do want to mention that story that I wanted to tell before, because I think it does show like what the media should not do, and I think it also shows that it's not just a problem of the difficulty of finding the right people. Okay, I got an
Tell you what,
email.
how about this? You tell that story, let's get some questions up from the booth, and we'll ask those after the stories. But please, I'm not interrupting you because I'm sensitive about past errors. It just doesn't help us to hear about something that happened in the past.
I mean,
But go
I
ahead.
just want to use it as a cautionary tale. Okay, so I get an email a few months ago from a person from Boston Magazine who says he is writing a piece about GamerGate, and you know he knows that I've written about it, and would I answer some questions? I said sure, and he sends me some questions, and I see that all of the questions are couched in terms of this narrative that, you know, GamerGate is a misogynist harassment campaign that, you know, wants to drive women out of gaming. And, you know, I answered the questions as best I could because it's difficult when the questions are couched in a certain narrative to kind of redirect from that.
I have a question. Was this
And
given to you via email?
Yes, this was an
Okay,
email
so
interview.
I will just say, email is the worst way to interview someone. All of my reporters, yes, you may ask a question via email. I tell them, now call them, we want to schedule, we want to sit down, and that's not just because we're TV.
Right, in
But
this
email
case-
is not, that would be, completely, unless that's the absolute last resort, and that's the only thing that like someone will agree to, that's what
no,
we do.
I mean,
So
I said, you know, I can answer questions by
Well,
phone.
Kathy,
I can
just
do
to
email,
add,
but
just
yeah, but
to add to
the
that,
other, yeah.
is that if you guys are looking for signs of what makes a good journalist or a bad journalist, that might be one of the signs that GamerGate wants to look out for. Is if you want to conduct this interview only by email, maybe that's a sign that I shouldn't trust you. I can tell you, I got interviewed by BuzzFeed. The guy wanted to do the email interview thing, and I said no. call me. And the story still came out.
It's very effective
Right,
at
right.
diffusing people who have a particular point of view that they want to put across
Yeah.
in the story. It's certainly
Well,
true.
Exactly. So before you go on, if we're getting one lesson out of this already, if GamerGate's going to get a lesson out of this, even though it's an online movement accustomed to dealing only online, I recommend, and I think Lynn and Ren would too, is get that reporter on the phone, because you know why? You think you see a harassment narrative, or you think you see the reporter have a definite preconceived idea, you will definitely get that idea when you get on the phone with them.
And it doesn't
Well, in
cost
this
anything
case-
to make a Skype burner account and
Yeah,
speak to the
yeah.
journalist with
So
that.
in this case,
Good idea.
so I answered the questions as best I could. And not only did I do that, but I said, here's a list of other people that you can contact, including women. Like, here's a female game developer who not only supports GamerGate, but actually has found herself sort of semi-blacklisted in certain areas because she's seen as, supporting a misogynist campaign despite being female. So what happens when the story comes out? It's couched completely in the harassment narrative. I'm not quoted. None of the people that I mentioned to this person were even interviewed. And instead, he's quoting, there are a couple of women who, again, who say that they've been harassed by GamerGate, completely uncritical acceptance of what they're saying. And then he's quoting as an expert, I'm not going to name names, but he's quoting an opinion columnist who writes for online publications, who on occasion has
I wanna get to some questions.
explicitly said, and I just want to finish this one point, but this is a person who has explicitly said that he is basically willing to not bend the facts, but at least leave out facts that don't fit, his ideological preconceptions. So, that's...
This is what GamerGate has seen across the mainstream media. If I can ask you guys another
I-
question about this, just from the point of view of maybe GamerGate, sorry, super quick, promise. What they kind of want to know is if a journalist is coming to you and you know that they're going to do this, this slanderous piece and
Bye.
Well, that's a lot of fun.
Hot? Okay, I can hear myself. Your laptop should still be where you left it over there.
All right.
Hello?
The stream's still on?
Yeah, it's still live.
Turn it off.
I gotta explain what happened first.
Turn it to me, I'll explain.
Fine, explain it.
Is this on?
Yes.
So you're telling me the stream was on the whole time we were out in Miami Heat?
Oh, you think I was gonna turn it off?
You think anyone's watching it now?
You've got 2,765 just watching on Sargon's stream, and on the official stream you have 518. That's more than when we were actually here. None of the mics were live. There was no video. It was a static image, and they were watching.
So, you know, in, I think it was in 1910, the Mona Lisa was stolen from the Louvre, and more people went to see the empty space than went to see the Mona Lisa.
Oh, of course.
So I think it's a little like that. Okay, so for those people who just left the stream on or fell under something heavy and couldn't turn it off, I think this was our 5th bomb threat. This was the most credible one.
I heard it was the 10th.
All right, well, I don't know where these numbers are coming from. The officer I spoke to, I'm still not clear on this. The bomb threat either came into the Miami Herald, which is a top 10 Pulitzer Prize winning paper down here, or the police station, or both at the same time. It had a time certain on it, like the bomb is going off at 2:45. So I actually asked why we can't just go back in after 2:45, and this is why I like being a journalist, because I learn new things. I never thought about this. What if someone called in the bomb threat from California and forgot to adjust for time zones? I mean, you can't say the people that issue bomb threats are really thorough, so I didn't think about that. So they had to do a full sweep of this place. We were outside. Luckily, the conversation continued. I was pretty impressed that Ren LaForme and Lynn Walsh, Ash Scow, Oliver Campbell joined us, Cathy Young, Mark Sebb, they joined us. Right across from a cop car, we took over a condemned house, and in the carport, continued the journalism and GamerGate conversation under the theory that the bomb threat was illegal, crashing into a no trespassing condemned home is illegal, therefore they cancel each other out, and it becomes totally legal.
Perfect logic.
That conversation continued until just now. They're going to be shutting this place down because I think this place hates me, and we're not going to ever be able to come back here again.
Do it in Tampa.
Well, you know what? I hope that regardless, you guys will continue this conversation. If people are actually watching this, then I have to say the following things. Number one, you should thank Florida Atlantic University OWL TV. They're the ones who came down here and did the shoot. These guys right here. And a true GamerGate moment, the guy up there in the booth, his name is John Smith. It's not his real name. I don't even really know his real name. I don't know if I want to know his real name.
You don't?
All right. But when he reached out to me when I started this and said that he wanted to help, he sounded like a good guy. As a journalist, you get to know if people are kind of bullshit artists. So I said, yeah, sure, help out. Well, that caused such a GamerGate catastrophe stir of excitement that Oliver had to have an emergency stream to vet this dude. Well, it turned out that all the technology that was done today, a multi-camera secure live stream, was done by a 19-year-old sitting up in that booth.
I had help. I want to take a moment and personally thank all of the people Koretsky brought in, as well as all of the volunteers who came here. I couldn't have done this without the help of everybody working the cameras and the sound. And I don't know if any of you want your name shouted out and people cheer. I just got a way of saying no, so I guess I could be the face that takes all the credit. Thanks to those people. Thanks to everybody who came out in support just to see the event or to attend and possibly to cover it. You're all amazing people. I love all of you. And thank you.
All right, so I don't know what's going to happen next, but here's the idea, is once we all take a shower and cool off, we're going to try to write some of this stuff up. It might take a little bit of time. But the idea is, some of the ideas that we floated out today, can we do those things? Can we try to set up an awards program for gaining journalists and the criteria be ethical, balanced reporting? Can we compile a list of the people that do the YouTube streams so that any journalist can go to that list, know who to start talking to, not to end the conversation, but to start the conversation? Can we do things like anybody that wants to do a GamerGate meetup, willing to have journalists come so that they can interview people in person? All the ideas that we talked about today, and any others that get floated out there, which I will check for in between all of the swastikas and calling me a fag, I will look for all of those, and we'll try to compile some stuff. I hope this isn't the last time that this happens. It doesn't have to be done in Miami. It doesn't have to be done by SPJ. It does not have to be done by me. I hope that GamerGate will continue this conversation. I have no idea what my role in that's going to be. I kind of want to disappear just to prove all the assholes wrong that said somehow this was going to make me $1 million and I was going to open a patron account.
Koretsky, you have like 1 minute, 60 seconds.
Good. So, if you want to know more about this, I'm going to keep the Airplay site up, SPJAirplay.com, for another month or two, maybe longer. We're going to see what happens. I will post something in about a week, and we'll see what happens. So I want to thank all of you guys that endured the bomb threat and everyone that listened. I've always wanted to say this, never could. You don't have to stay home, but you can't stay here.